1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay.
I'd like to call to order the January 13th, 2020 regular board meeting of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. Please rise for the pledge. Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone who is here with us this evening, as well as those of you who are viewing from home. I'd like to announce the board held an executive session on December 16th regarding real estate, personnel, and student discipline, and prior to this meeting regarding school security. With board members with an agenda before you, are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, all right. Then seeing none, we'll move on into communication. The first item under communication, we have a retiree on our agenda this evening who has greater than 25 years of service with the district. Lori Mosquelier is retiring at the end of this school year with 25 years in the district. Since she was hired on September 13th, 1995, Lori has been a secretary with the Educational Alternative Programs. Director of Educational Alternatives, John Downs, commended Lori for her work, saying, "We want to extend our appreciation to Lori Mosquelier for her commitment and consistent dedication to educational alternatives for 25 years. Lori has worked with Delta, Wright, Hearts, Strides, and virtual programming over her tenure. Lori has been very adaptive as she has balanced different programs, needs, and cultures. The scope of her work has changed with the programs being added, locations changing, and procedures in flux. Lori has been a pleasant and approachable person to students and staff as she has worked quietly behind the scenes. She will be dearly missed, but we wish her all the best in a well-deserved retirement." And the board would like to thank Lori for her service and also wish her all the best in her retirement. Okay, then moving on, in communications, we have a legislative update.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So a couple of things. First of all, there's a legislative breakfast this Friday. I just want to let the community know. Area school district boards will be speaking with our local state legislators about state concerns for education in our communities. And then last week we had a call. We were joined on the call by Representative Bradford from Montgomery County. He's from the Appropriations Committee. And some good news, he's hopeful about an on-time budget this year. So Randy, yay. He also is focused on, he talked about the governor being focused on education funding, including pre-K, and noted that the legislators have an appetite for cutting property taxes, but also recognition that crafting a statewide solution is going to be incredibly difficult, and so there's a challenge there. PSBA is specifically going to be working on education funding requests in the coming weeks and months. Priorities include special education and PlanCon funding. PlanCon funding in particular was not funded last year. And a special note that special education funding used to be funded at about a third of where it at about 37%, and now we're down to 25%, and so it's a high priority. They're also talking about planning a transportation funding work group, and so they'll be looking for volunteers for that work group, which they're planning on happening in June. There has been no transportation funding increase since 2007. They're also looking for feedback from boards on EITC, and the governor's mental health plan his office would like some feedback about what would be the best use of those funds in school districts. So I will summarize those things for you, board, and that's what I have for today.
Thanks. Great. And then a COG report.
Yeah, and I actually had one other communication before the COG report, which is that Delta Middle will have their performance of Disney Frozen Junior on Thursday and Friday evenings this week at 7 p.m. at the high school. And then on to the COG report. 2 items. One is the Parks and Rec Master Plan is coming to completion, and that will be presented to the COG by the committee chair, Bruce Lord, on January 27th at the COG meeting, and then the entities will vote to accept it. We do not, SCASD does not, because we are not a voting member. And then I can provide further details after that vote. And then the second item from COG is the solar purchasing power agreement, which is a little postponed compared to where we thought we were, due to CADA's needs because they get money from and regulations that they have to abide by from the federal government, and so they had to look at the structure of how things were being planned, and it might get altered a little bit. That's to be determined. But the vote that the entities will need to engage in will still be at the end of February, and that date has not changed. It'll just be what it actually looks like when we go to vote on it.
All right. Board members, any other communication items? Okay, Dr. O'Donnell?
Yes, just have one item this evening. I'd also like to welcome the kindergarten teachers who joined us this evening. Welcome. In honor of January being board, who's that?
She's Delta. She's not a kindergarten
Being
teacher.
Board Director Recognition Month, I'd like to express our appreciation for our 9 board members and their commitment to our school district. Each week, they volunteer many hours towards serving our students, our faculty and staff, and helping to make our schools and facilities the best they can be. They lead busy lives, and yet they take their roles as elected representatives of our community very seriously, tackling complex issues and often making tough choices. Through it all, they're guided by the same inspiration that drives our school district, a desire to help our children grow into thoughtful, responsible, and successful adults. Our board members could be devoting their time and talents elsewhere, but they have chosen to provide their insight and leadership in service of public education. For that, we're all very grateful. As a token of our gratitude, we have a travel mug at your seat for when you need coffee to get through some of our long evenings here. In addition, we are inviting you to experience an in-depth look into the day in the life of our culinary arts students in the high school. That is, we've scheduled an opportunity for you to visit the program, and you'll really enjoy assessing their work. It'll be a good in all seriousness, I appreciate everything you do for us, for me and our team, and the service you do to our community. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. It's really an honor to serve a district like this
You
one.
bet.
Okay, any other communication items this week then?
No, I don't have anything else.
Great, thank you. At this time on the agenda, we have time for public comment. Each individual is limited to comments of up to 3 minutes, as time permits for items on the agenda or pertaining to board business, if anyone would like to make a public comment. Yeah, if you could come up to the podium and state your name and where you reside.
He's not
Oh,
a kindergarten
yeah.
teacher either.
Is that what did you say? Hello, Gene Russo, President, State College Area Education Association. I just wanted to take a moment and thank the board during this Board Appreciation Week. As much as our members can attend board meetings to see some of your work, many do not see the efforts and energies you put forth to support the district, its students, and its teachers. We look forward to continued positive and collaborative discussions that will improve the lives of our educators and the academic experiences of our students to be the best they can be. So again, SCAA, thanks you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jean.
Thanks, Gene.
Okay. Would anyone else like to make a public comment? Okay. All right, then we will move on to routine approvals. I would like a motion to approve the routine approval listing as presented on the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion on routine approvals? Then we'll have a roll call vote.
Mr. Fozart.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney. Yes. Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Vidal.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Okay, that item is passed. Item A, under action, is a motion to approve the elementary project change orders as shown in attachment 5A.
So moved. Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney. Yes. Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Vidal.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Mr. Fozart.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item B is a motion to approve the high school project change orders shown in attachment 5B.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Laurel?
Just a couple of questions, sorry. Couple of questions. The one on, there are a couple of them, it just seems the dollar amounts are fairly high. One is the temporary treads on the staircase. Given that it was temporary and it was in order to open the building on time, I'm wondering why that cost comes back to the district as opposed to the contractor or whomever needed to do the temporary work.
Well, there were unforeseen conditions regarding ceiling heights in that area, and there was a redesign involved. We worked closely with the architectural team and the contracting team, and there was an ability for the contractor to request a delay at that point and not have the stair finished for the first day of school. And the reason that we're paying for the change order is because we requested the temporary solution in lieu of a delay, which the contractor could have been granted. And we felt that the pain of a large change order in the sense of $17,000 at this point was preferable to delaying the project.
So when you say, what you mean when you say he requested is that there were grounds that
The contractor had legitimate grounds for a
Okay.
scheduled delay.
That was, and the gaps in steel,
So that is GC
It's the next one,
288? Yeah. So that's a structural steel issue, and the reason for the cost is the gaps were creating, it was structural steel that was creating a gap that would have been a safety issue. So it was structural steel that was not included in the project documents, and the length of the walkway and the amount of steel that was involved is driving the cost there.
thank you.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Okay. All right, then, is there any public comment? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Bedell.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Mr. Fozard.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item C is a motion to approve FF&E items for the elementary school projects, and this is shown in attachment 5C.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Bedell.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Mr. Fozard.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Okay, that item is passed. Item D is a motion to approve the Delta Fitness Center project change order that is shown in attachment 5D.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions? Yeah. Okay. Laurel?
Just, I don't need it for right now, but if you could email us and perhaps even add it to this, what the final total was, because we don't have the little chart like on the other things. Thank you.
Any other? Okay. Any public comment? Okay. We'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Bedell.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Mr. Fozard.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item E is a motion to approve the memorial field change order shown in attachment 5E.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Mr. Fozard.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Bedell.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item F is a motion to approve the bidding for summer 2020 physical plant projects as shown in attachment 5F.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Okay, Laurel?
One of the things in here is the high school, and it talks about requests for finished projects that don't meet operational needs. and that they're still being decided. So I assume they would be decided before this actually goes, and this is just the bidding, I understand that, but that would be decided before.
Correct. I don't have at this point, I don't have any specific project per se in mind.
Okay.
We were discussing with various departments some needs that may turn into projects, so I have some placeholder money there. And as we move through this and evaluate some of the requests there, we'll see if they turn into projects, and then they'll come before you as as if they're bids or purchases, one way or the other. They could be a
Okay.
combination
They will
of
come.
things.
Okay, that was, the concern was what about ones that didn't need to be bid? They would then come as projects. Okay. Thank you.
Then the other item was that we had talked about for summer 2020 was curb cuts at the high school, and I understand that'll be a discussion that's coming. It's not happening because it's not on this document. It's still
It's
still
on
being-
the document. There's a line item on the document for that.
But the
So the actual.
right, but it's not being bid at this time, right?
So with all of these are items we're reviewing, contemplating, preparing estimates, a variety of issues, we're going to talk about that specific item at February Facilities and Grounds.
Okay.
Prior to taking further action, but it's processed like the others. I anticipate it will become a bid at some point for the summer, so it will be.
Okay.
Would be an item.
Just a quick question. And so the memo says that the 5-year plan update is planned for the February facilities meeting. So is that to mean that everything that's listed as a line item is going to be fleshed out more or up for?
No, not necessarily. That line, we can talk about each of the items in any amount of detail that's there. The idea is that we would go over the full 5-year plan and not just 1 year of the plan. And the way we've done this in every previous year, and if the board requires different this year, we can discuss it, but it's been that this is the document that's a blanket permission to bid, and we don't come back with each line item and ask again for permission to bid, but you'll see them again as bids are received. And then that will, accepting the bids or rejecting the bids will be your chance to approve or reject the project.
Got it. Thank you.
If we have specific, anything unusual comes that has us concerned, we would obviously bring that forth as opposed to doing a lot of work that while you're in the dark, if something changes or has a significant scope difference from what we've portrayed here, we would obviously try to discuss it ahead of time. But assuming things move along in a normal progression, the next time you would see it would be, either at bid award or at a purchasing approval.
Okay, thank you.
Can I go back to the curb cuts for one moment then? So before those are bid, you would anticipate that the board would see a map then?
So
of
for
where-
that line item specifically, we plan on discussing in more detail in February.
Okay.
That'd be one of those ones that I know you'd like to talk more about prior to actually seeing a bid number.
Right, okay, sounds good. Other questions? Okay. All right, is there any public comment on this item then? Okay, then we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Mr. Fozard.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Bedell.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item G is a motion to approve the automotive technology hand tools for Career and Technical Center shown in attachment 5G.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion on this one? Okay, Jim?
Are these just replacement tools, or are these new? They're replacement, okay.
Any other questions? Okay, then we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Mr. Fozard.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Bedell.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes. Item H is a motion to approve Agreement 2019-2020-1.
So moved.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded, and we'll have a roll call vote on that.
Mr. Fozard.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Bedell.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Okay, that item is approved. Item I is a motion to approve the expulsion waiver agreement 2019-2020-02.
So moved. Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. And then we'll have a roll call vote.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Bedell.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Mr. Fozard.
Yes.
Okay, that item has been approved. Item J is a motion to approve the purchase, I'm sorry. We talked about actually taking item J and postponing until the next meeting to be an action item. I'm sorry, we should have mentioned that when we were talking about any changes to the agenda. So I apologize for that. That's my fault. That item will be moved to action on the next meeting, if everyone's in agreement with that. Okay. Then moving on to information discussion. Item A, District Goal Category Student Learning. The first item will be a research proposal by Dr. Samuel Tanner. This is shown in attachment 6A1, and I think Dr. Tanner is here to share his work with us and his request. So thank you for being here. Welcome.
Hi, Dr. Tanner. We did have Sam come to Culture, Climate, and Learning, so those board members had a chance to have a conversation with Sam there and get a sense of what his request was and the students he'd be interfacing with if this was approved. So I'll turn it over to Sam and Will and go from there.
Thanks for the intro, Dr. O'Donnell. And I just wanted to add what Bob had said earlier, that Sam did come to CCL and presented his research study. One of the attachments I just provided was his IRB approval from Penn State. It is exempt research. That technically, because it's exempt, would not need to go through the board, but we think it's an appropriate study, and he did go to CCL, so we have him here tonight at the board just to present his study.
So, first off, I don't know if I'm tall enough to reach this microphone. And secondly, when I came to CCL, I think it was in the morning, and so I was super articulate. It is way past my bedtime right now, so I'm going to do my best. But maybe I'll give you a very brief background as to who I am and to what the project is, and then we can just go into questions about it, and I can just kind of chat this through with you. So my name is Sam. I'm faculty at Penn State in the College of Ed, Literacy Education. I've been out here 5 years now. This is my 5th year. I have a son who is in Ferguson Township, and his teachers are back there, which is cool. Prior to that, I was a high school English and drama teacher for about 15 years in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. I spent my first 4 years as a teacher in an urban school district with a predominantly black student population before being recruited to teach at a more suburban school district that had a more affluent white population, a population that I'd probably say is pretty similar to SCASD's population as I understand it. During that time, I grew really passionate about anti-racism in my teaching, about working in diverse contexts, about equity, and about issues of social justice. Those things fueled my work as I moved into a PhD program at the University of Minnesota, and they've been sort of a part of my research agenda, which I can talk about. I don't want to get started because I'll go way too long, but I can talk about that with you if you're interested. But specifically, what I'm sitting here with you for tonight is a colleague of mine from the UNC system and I have been working for about 4 years to devise anti-racist pedagogy in K-12 contexts that's rooted in improv theater and social justice theater. So my friend Erin and I, 4 years ago, we piloted this project actually in Bellwood-Antis in a 4th grade classroom in that school district, as well as in Charlotte and as in Columbia, South Carolina. We essentially did a 3-day workshop where we talked about issues of power, and we used practices of critical literacy, which I can talk about if you have questions about from the proposal that you saw, and then moved into using improv theater as a way to explore some of the issues that came up, and then discussed their work in relation to issues of power and issues of race. So that work ended up getting funded by Spencer Foundation. Spencer Foundation gave us a small grant to continue developing this work. One of our goals was to move this from beyond an elementary scope into a secondary scope. So I was in contact with Saria, and I know that you have this awesome social justice class at the high school that I think is super exciting. My hope is to bring this 3-day workshop to that social justice class as a way to explore what it looks like doing it here at SCAS. Essentially, the project is a day of talking about power and sort of making sense of signs and symbols with critical literacy. And again, I can explain and talk about that if you want. And then moving into improv theater as a way to think about issues of race and power before moving into a discussion. It's research in the sense that this is not like a quantitative study where I'm seeing how many kids did this or this thing, but instead we're taking field notes and we're documenting it through writing and kind of processing with the students and taking note of what happens. All right, I warned you that that wasn't going to be all that articulate, and it didn't feel like it was, but I do think I sort of explained the project. If you have questions that are arising, I'm happy to talk through them with you.
Sure. Okay. I'll start over here. Anyone has any questions? Laurel? Yeah.
Thank you for coming and explaining a little more. I thought it was pretty articulate. When districts look for things that are called research-based, is this something that then, based on the notes and all, that you would publish in a way that another district might be able to say, hey, this is a research-based project instead of just his idea?
Absolutely. And so out of the work I told you about already, my colleague and I have 4 different publications, articles in top research journals about the work that we've done. And we see that as contributing to growing knowledges about how to... I think everybody recognizes a great need to tackle issues of race in K-12 contexts. If I'm being very honest, I don't know that there's a lot of great research out there about how do we actually do this, and then what happens when we actually do this. And I think what's interesting about what Aaron and I are doing is we were in a 4th grade classroom with predominantly white students in Bellwood-Antis talking about issues of race, and doing so in sort of a playful way through improv theater, a playful but very serious way in terms of where their discussions came out of that. So I see this as really an outgrowth of the passion that I've had in education for the last 20 years is how do we actually deal with issues of race in ways that don't shut people down, in ways that welcome discussion and dialogue, and in ways that we can share beyond just my classroom, right? Like, this is a funny thing to say, but I went from being a high school teacher to the position I'm in at Penn State right now with the real belief that I want to continue to contribute to broader discourses of education around, it's one thing to do an awesome project in your classroom, it's another thing to be sitting here tonight at the school board suggesting that I want to share this work with you, and then that I want to share this work with other folks in Charlotte and beyond that. So we're actually working with a publisher, Teachers College Press, on a book project that's based out of this research, and I imagine that what happens here would probably be a part of that. Okay. That was long-winded. I hope that addressed.
No, I just, because when I first read this, I thought, why do we even need to approve it? And you addressed some of that, because it sounds to me like something we allow our teachers to pick things that they believe will do what our curriculum includes, which does include some of this stuff. But what I'm gathering then, and I just wanted to be clear about, is that, which I think is a good thing, but that this becomes as you said, it's not qualitative the way, or quantitative the way we may think A and B, but in order to write it up so that other people could get the benefit of this, it needs to be approved through a research. And so I just wanted to confirm that and make sure that that was clear, because I think there is a question of why this just looks very different from many of the research proposals we get that are that more here's before and here's after.
I want to be brief, but I just want to share this quickly too. I did work like this in a high school back in the Twin Cities. I think part of the value of talking with the school board right now is this is work that I feel like a school district needs to be behind if it's going to move forward. And I know some of the work you're pushing forward right now as a board and as a district. I think there's value in knowing that the school district supports the kind of thing, this kind of project that I hope to bring to the social justice class. But I also see there's other ways for this work to contribute, whether it be professional development or different manifestations of the workshop. And so knowing that the school board supports that feels really important to me. I'm sorry, I'm ranting.
That's okay.
Public comment, 3 minutes.
And I think whenever, when we have studies that are being done in our schools that are leading to published works, we usually have it come through board approval. Any other-
We had thought because it would interface with students when we read the policy that it naturally came here. Initially, when we thought it would be just interfacing with the social justice class, small number of kids, in line with curriculum in the course, we were questioning whether or not it would be required to be here, but then we had decided to bring it to CCL because it was going to involve students in the research. So.
Other questions? Gretchen?
Yeah, two things. One, I think that this is super cool what you're doing because in all of the conferences that we attend, I try to go to as many sessions on equity and diversity issue, inclusiveness as I can, and all the ones I've ever seen, most of them Pennsylvania, but we've also been to national conferences, are all how to work with administrators primarily, somewhat teachers and professional development. We talk about that a lot, but this is with the students. And that to me really stands out because in people who know a lot about this than I do, that's what they tell me we should be doing. And so I just wanted to say how great that aspect is and unique, I think, as well. And when we go to Pennsylvania School Board Association and ask, well, how do we implement our inclusive excellence policy? The answer is, well, we're learning it while we're doing it. And so a project like this, I think, is us learning it while we're doing it. And so from what I've gathered, I'm fully supportive of this. I just had a quick question. So why is it that you're exempt from IRB if you're dealing with human subjects?
So a lot of the work that I do, because it's qualitative, interpretive, ethnographic field notes, and not so much experimental. I mean, that's a long conversation about what is the definition of research. I think it's because, I think it's because I'm not gathering numbers and then using those numbers to claim something. That's a terrible answer to your question. But honestly, I don't know. I feel like sometimes qualitative research isn't viewed as serious research, although I don't think that's true in scholarly communities.
Right.
But with IRB, sometimes it is. And so I don't know. The work I do usually tends to be exempt. So.
Thanks.
Dan?
Dr. Stern, it's good to see you again. Thanks for offering your time to explain your proposal. When we talked about this before in CCL, it just occurred to me at the time to ask for you to explain or to describe what social justice theater looked like. So I think in terms of making sense of this, in terms of what, for me, it helped a lot to hear about the kinds of activity that would be involved in this so we all could have a sense of what would these activities be.
I mean, I love that question because it would allow me to flip the nervousness here and like get all of you up on your feet doing things in the middle. But no, I'm kidding. I just did so I'm with Happy Valley Improv, which is a local improv theater company, and a lot of our work is getting booked to do workshops using improv to discuss issues, and one of them is race, right? And so what you would see if you came to the workshop in the social justice class, if it moves forward, is you would see a lot of what seems like sort of silly, funny games where we're standing in a circle, we're very focused on each other, and we're playing sort of focused theater games. But really what we're doing is we're easing into being uncomfortable with each other and not really noticing it. And from there then, so an activity I just did last week with a group was called Image Theater, Augusto Ball's Image Theater. It's where we take a concept, and I would take Bob O'Donnell and Lori Bedell, and I would have them go up in front of us, and they would create a sculpted frozen image of a concept, right? And then we as a group would comment on that and use that image as a way to discuss what they're trying to embody. Now, 2 other people in the group would have done the exact same thing, and then we would have tried to compare and discuss their differences. I'm telling you that when you move from sort of the playful improv games into doing frozen scenes about race, or frozen scenes about inequity or inequality, that the conversation becomes very serious, but I believe you've been set up to enter that conversation in a way that doesn't make you defensive and doesn't make it so that conversation gets shut down. So much of my experience with anti-racist and social justice work is that it can shut folks down, and I think this is a unique way to invite folks into a discussion that can be both fun but also super powerful. So.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And thanks for the NCTE reference too. That position paper was really helpful. Thank you.
Yes, yeah.
Any other questions?
No, I appreciated all you shared at committee.
I just have a quick comment, and that is that following Dr. Tanner's presentation, we're going to be hearing from Dr. Chatters. And when I look at Dr. Tanner's proposal, I think about the ways that this just continues to enhance and expand the work that Dr. Chatters is doing. And, you know, when I look at what she's going to be presenting to us and the scope and breadth of this, you know, anytime we can lend a hand in, you know, spreading the tentacles of teaching about equity and anti-racism, I think it's a great opportunity to do it. And knowing Dr. Tanner for quite some time now, I feel really confident and comfortable in the motivation and the strategies and the professionalism and scholarly foundations of the work that he's doing. So I'm really proud to support this.
Could I make a motion that we approve the research proposal by Dr. Samuel Tanner?
Should we move it to action?
Move it to action, yeah.
Okay.
That
So you'd
we-
like to move that?
I'd
we
like
move
to
it to
move it
action?
to action.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded that we move it to action. All in favor of moving it to action?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, then would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I would like to motion that we approve the research proposal by Dr. Samuel Tanner, Improvising Against Racism.
Second. Second, okay. Then there's, we have moved to approve the research proposal, and then we can take questions or discussion on the motion, so.
I did have one more question. Because it references a castle, are you limited to that? Or deep within this, it said such as, and I just wanted to clarify that that you have that flexibility, that this was just.
Absolutely, and it's a super long conversation that I promise I won't let myself go into. The castle became one symbol that allowed us to do some practices of critical literacy, but it could be as simple as we did studies on castles, forts, and walls, and other kind of seemingly benign symbols in childhood books or in literature, and we use those as ways to deconstruct power structures within there.
Yeah, I was just asking yes and no, and what I heard was, yes, it's broader.
Absolutely,
Fine.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, any other questions? Okay, any public comment? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote then.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Bedell.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Mr. Fozard.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Thank you very much for being here this evening.
Thank you all. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thanks,
you.
Sam. See you soon.
Okay, so the next item under information discussion is our equity and inclusivity update with Dr. Chatters. This is shown in attachment 6A2.
As Sri is getting set up, she too visited this fall. This is a little bit more of an update that's been refined, but she did spend some time with the Culture, Climate, and Learning Committee of the board in October to share an update of much of the work happening around the district, and we'll have her expand upon that and give you an opportunity to ask some questions of her. So, good evening, Surya. Welcome.
Good evening.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I love the skirt.
Yeah, me too.
Love it. It looks good. Okay, so I wanted to just point out some highlights and then open it up for questions because I know everyone has the document to read. The first highlight I'd just like to take a look at is at the very beginning when we talk about equity, and that is our working definition of equity. It's something that when we look at forming our district-wide equity leadership team, we hope to be able to wrestle with that topic as a district-wide equity leadership team, as well as wrestling with what our vision is around equity and how that directly connects to our inclusive excellence policy. So that's one thing that I wanted to point out because it's very important. That's going to be some very important work that our equity, district-wide equity leadership team is going to be working on. The second thing that I wanted to point out was our district-wide equity priorities, which I think are very important. One of the first things you see there is to complete an equity audit. That is going to be something that, as we work together as a team, we're looking to do, which is basically looking over the entire district, and that is in every department, because I don't know if, I know likely most of you are aware of PSBA's equity toolkit that they came out with, equity as a process. It demonstrates that equity is to be at the foundation of every single part of your school district. So that equity audit is really looking at that, and then with that information, reviewing our inclusive excellence policy, as well as developing an equity action plan that we can use to basically implement our revised inclusive excellence policy. So some of that work, I just wanted to make sure that I drew your attention to at the top is some of the most significant work. It's interesting how little bit of the page it takes up, but that's the major work that's in those few bullet points there. So those are some of those primary pieces.
Sri, can I jump in
yeah.
regard to the strategic plan? Because we've had
I
a lot of conversation about how to interface this work within the strategic plan. And although we are going to have a midpoint review next fall, we think the work this year will interface well to make some refinements to the strategic plan, including some of the strategies. Obviously, the opportunity gap, the achievement gap, those goals in the strategic plan are very focused on equity issues or inequities and getting kids what they need. And I think that her point around the definition of equity, I think, was very important. We discussed quite a bit of equity and inclusivity related issues when we developed the strategic plan, but I think we will be a little bit more focused. We know a lot more now than we did when we developed that plan. So I just wanted to point that out. There is although that's a small part of the update, there's some heavy lifting there, and we think the work that we do this year will be timely because interfacing and actually inviting the people on the leadership team to be part of strategic planning will help those conversations in the direction or the refined direction of that plan. So thanks, Rita.
Right. So moving on, just some of the additional highlights. No Place for Hate, which was something that we discussed earlier this year. That is up and running with fully formed No Place for Hate committees at each of the secondary schools. We have done the pre-surveys, or it's considered a survey that's looking at bias and bullying, and we will be hoping to give you all an update of that information at a later time. All of the surveys have been completed, and also all of the schools have done their No Place for Hate resolution signing, and are working on that first big large-scale activity. And the large-scale activity kind of takes us into the next highlight that I wanted to point out, which is about the Peer Advocates Program. The large-scale activity that's being currently done at the high school right now is a forum that is being conducted. Basically, that's kind of came out of some of the incidents that have happened at the high school that the public has been aware of due to us notifying them as a school district. Our peer advocates actually developed and put together a forum that they are going to be cycling every English class through, and they're really talking about in that forum the impact and the history of the N-word. The students developed it and are actually facilitating it with the No Place for Hate committee. And that first activity has qualified, the Anti-Defamation League No Place for Hate qualified that activity as our first school-wide activity. So why that is huge is because you have to do 3 school-wide to be designated a No Place for Hate school, so State High is well on its way. Also the No Place for Hate committee has already planned 2 more, so it would be really nice to be able to, that we're working toward that designation as schools. And lastly, because I know we want to make sure that we have a lot of time for questions here, I think that one of the major outcomes really of a lot of the equity work has been the social justice courses that are at the high school and also at Delta High School and Delta Middle. Many of you were present last year, which sounds very weird to even say at this point, for the Bridging Divides trip and their presentation. That was a really moving and impactful presentation. That trip, that course, those students just recently sent me a list of the number of community action projects that they are actually doing within our State College area school district as well as within the State College community. And there is 40 different projects that students are actively working on that range from writing a children's book on John Lewis that goes all the way up to doing community forums, discussions, and deliberations. All of these are student-led, student-developed projects. So that is really exciting, all of that work that is coming out of that course, as well as work that is coming out of the course at State High as well. And then lastly, the Peer Advocates Program. The Peer Advocates program is up and running, and many of those students are doing a lot of work within the community. We've had approximately 6 of them that have done all of the additional work that's coming in on Saturdays and after school this school year to work toward becoming peer counselors. And we will be looking at launching that peer counseling program here within the month. In addition to that, last year I was planning the Summer Institute. This year, peer advocates have stepped forward and said that they would like to work diligently and plan the next upcoming Summer Institute. So it has been really exciting to see a lot of students at the middle and the high school level really getting involved and active in equity. And so with that, I'd like to open it up for questions.
Questions over here?
I just have a couple. First of all, on behalf of the board, thank you. This is incredible work, and what strikes me about this memo is the ambition of this very short amount of time that you have been with us and what has been accomplished thus far. So thank you so much. So just a couple quick questions. First of all, who comprises the No Place for Hate committees?
Sure.
What's that look like?
Okay, so each school has a No Place for Hate committee, and it's students, teachers, as well as parents. And each of the committees also has a coordinator. At State High, the coordinator is myself and Deanna Burgess. And at Mountain Indy Middle School, it is Alex Raup. And at Alex Raup and Linda Brown. And at Park Forest Middle School, it's Lorraine Fellow, as well as Danielle Fulmer. So the committees are basically at the middle schools, they're primarily worked through and run by the administrators and the teachers because of it being middle school level students. And they do a lot of their work through ROAR, and it is students, and then they also gain parent input at the high school because the high school, of course, the high schoolers, Isabel Snyder, a student at State High, is the No Place for Hate student coordinator there, and then works with that committee with the support of myself and Deanna Burgess.
Okay, that's great. You mentioned the projects that came out of the trip last year, and
Yes.
you mentioned deliberations. Is that Lori McGarry that's going to be leading those deliberations?
So the deliberations that the students are doing, there are 2 students, I believe, and I'll say in the mic, don't quote me on this, even though I know the notes are going down. But I believe it's 2 students that are looking to do deliberations that they're working alongside Lori McGarry to plan those out. But then we have another one that we're working on that I'm actually working on with Lori McGarry, David Hutchinson, Virginia Squire, that's actually more adult-led. So you'll see a lot of things coming out. Some are going to be student-led and facilitated, and some, of course, will be facilitated by the Office of Equity.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, Scott?
Yeah, so we, throughout the board, we just finished a financial statement audit. We're
Yes.
talking about a sustainability audit and
Yes.
an equity audit. What's the equity audit entail? How's it going to be done? Just big picture, not any specifics, but what's the
Absolutely.
plan relative to the audit?
So PSBA actually has an equity audit that they have developed, and it's really looking at where, for example, from a budget standpoint, right? When we talk about equity, getting resources to those who really need it, right? So I say that because I say from a budget standpoint, we could all think about money, right? But when we think about equitable teaching practices and different things like that, what equity audit is looking at is your opportunity gaps. right? Are there opportunity gaps in your district, and what are you doing? What programming, what targeted processes do you have in place that are really directly aimed at closing those gaps, right? What's missing, what's currently there, how well is it working, right? Now, at a larger scale, at some other districts, which wouldn't really apply to this district, in some districts, depending upon the schools that are considered to be the schools that are let's say, not as economically disadvantaged schools, sometimes you find they'll look at the education level of the teachers at those schools, because that's really important. Are the schools that have students that need the most support, do they actually have the most highly qualified teachers? Are there the most highly qualified teachers in different classrooms with students that need the most support? Those are some of the big level things around equity audits. Now, of course, it also gets into climate, around cultural climate, which we kind of have, we've already kind of been doing that with our No Place for Hate student survey. But No Place for Hate, for example, has teacher surveys that also look at the same thing around climate, looking at different things like equity, around race, sexual orientation, disability, socioeconomic status, all of those things.
Great, thanks.
Does it review your policy structure?
So, no. But within the process, meaning like the equity audit itself does not, like, meaning it doesn't break it down, but it says at the beginning of it that you should do a review of policy, a review of handbooks. And some of those things, if you notice in the equity update, with our restorative practices, with us taking that up, we plan on doing that anyway. So it really makes sense to go ahead and do that alongside that movement toward restorative practices.
That makes sense. I think handbooks are something that I could imagine that being it's a kind of a discrete project, whereas the policy manual is that's a much bigger project.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Because the reason why you want to look at that inclusive excellence policy is with equity being at the foundation, that policy really needs to be able to talk to all of your other policies, like the computer language, right? So absolutely. It says at the beginning that you need to do that. Again, it's one line. That's really a whole lot of years of work.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions over here? Jim? Yeah.
Who does the equity audit?
The equity leadership team.
Okay.
So when we.
Based on guidelines from PSB?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So we do.
Okay.
But you have sort of a blueprint then.
We do, and the other thing is that we can always enlist assistance and help because, but of course, like I said, that's something that we as a team can sit down and consider how we're going to do that and how we're going to go about it. So.
Amy?
I'm good. Thank you for all the detail in the memo.
Yeah.
Dr. Chatters, I'm really excited about one element in the memo, and that's the reference to the Equity Leadership Summit.
Yes.
And there are elements of, I think, of this larger set of initiatives that deals with the problems that occur in terms of use of the misuse or inappropriate use or wrongful use, racist meaning of the N-word, for example.
Yes.
There are things like that, that obviously there's a need and a role to intervene in that area. But I think in terms of the inclusive excellence policy, in its development, the thought was to expand the capacity of the school district in terms of dealing with the diversity of the whole student population and the strengthening of the capacity of individual students to see the others as being different from themselves, but seeing the need, in a sense, to bring everyone together and and such. And I guess is the element in the Equity Leadership Summit that makes reference to the 2-day Equity Leadership Summit training for student leaders to develop a deeper understanding of their identity, power, and privilege,
Yes.
as well as methods to be more inclusive and more aware when recruiting club members, planning activities and events.
Yes.
I mean, that so embodies, I think, what some of the main goals in the policy
Absolutely.
were intended to address. So I really appreciate that being included. That's really helpful.
And I'll tell you where that grew from is we started noticing at State High we were leaning a lot on peer advocates, which is interesting. It's a brand new program. But with restorative practices being at the core of what we're looking to do, we have a group of students now that receive this deep training in equity and working with peers. And so oftentimes it would say, where a peer advocate can do that, or a peer advocate, or a peer advocate, or a peer.
Yeah.
And then we started to say to ourselves, well, you know what, this training that the peer advocates received, our student leaders need to receive some of this training, so how can we do that? And Mr. Johnson, we're going to be planning that. Mr. Johnson has been kind enough that we're going to do it as a 2-day in-school field trip, right? To be able to work with those students and kind of give them a taster of what the peer advocates received, because we need to really increase the number of students that have this kind of training.
Great, thank you.
Gretchen?
Thank you, Dr. Chatters. This is really helpful to have the update for somebody like me who's not on CCL, not on any steering committee, and so I'm pretty ignorant about what's actually happening until I hear your presentation and read the memo. So it's just really incredibly helpful to find out what's going on in the district. And with that limited information that I have, because I'm not on CCL, for example, or the steering committee, I just have one question, which is, I mean, all these programs sound great, awesome, and I'm wondering, like, is there anything, or which of these that are in your memo would reach students who maybe don't necessarily, are not attracted to this issue area? Perhaps the ones who might need the most education in this issue area, because, for example, the social justice class, that's going to be students who are interested in social justice, peer advocates, they're going to be interested in becoming a leader in this area. But for the ones who are really maybe who we want to talk to the most about these issues, what do we have that's reaching them?
That's a good question. So that is really where the student forums were born out of. And we worked directly with Mary Lou Manhart, the 6 through 12 English coordinator. And those forums, it's a 90-minute forum and that the students are doing, and every single English class in State High is going through those forums. So mind you, that is a huge undertaking. That's the forum in which we're talking about the history as well as the impact of the N-word. But the bulk of that forum is actually student-facilitated discussion. So it is the peer advocates breaking out into small tables with students, and all students are coming to that forum, meaning the reason why they chose the English classes is they knew by doing that, we'd be hitting every student, right? And for any class that is unable to come due to accommodations or needs, our peer advocates are then going to that class to facilitate the forum. So that's one program, that student-led forum, that's really hitting everyone across State High. Now, mind you, we do not and have not had the ability to get something like the Peer Advocates Program, only primarily because I have to recognize my limits as being one person right now, but to say, to getting something like this up and running at the middle school, right? The middle school, the No Place for Hate initiative, one of the key pieces of that, the reason why the student-led forum fits under that, is No Place for Hate requires that there is education around bias that goes school-wide. Every single student has to get this kind of initiative. They even ask you, please calculate what percentage of your student body is getting this education. So the No Place for Hate initiatives that's being facilitated at the middle school through the No Place for Hate committees are also going to hit students whether they are interested in the topic and learning about it or not, because it's part of the initiative. So some of those pieces are some of those things that are going to be hitting every kid.
Thank you.
Laurel?
This is helpful. It's also nice to see the list of things that you're doing in the community, because I know that's a two-way street, and I appreciate that time and your involvement there. With the No Place for Hate, it says the resolution of respect has been signed, and I'm wondering who did that when you talk about this having been done already and who is on the No Place for Hate committee.
So each school kind of did it in their own way. At State High, excuse me, Isabel Snyder and the No Place for Hate committee members, they had out humongous copies of the resolution of respect out in the Center for Equity over lunchtime, encouraging students to sign it prior to them doing the survey. At some of the middle schools, they did it in class, or they also did large pieces of paper and encourage, students to sign it. One of the key things with signing the resolution of respect is you can't force a student to sign it, right? So it's basically, it's several bullet points that No Place for Hate has put together, and I cannot remember it off the top of my head, so I apologize about that. But it's basically saying that when you see incidents of discrimination, that you will stand up and you will say something about it. So it's basically, I am pledging to make my school a respectful place. I am pledging to make my school no place for hate. Now, it happens at the beginning. They like it to happen at the very beginning of anything. They do not want any activities or anything like that to have happened before this happens, right? And then what the requirement of the program is, then you do the assessment and then you do the activities, right? And within those activities now, you can always reference back that resolution of respect that students either signed or did not sign, right? And working together to keep our school to be no place for hate.
Is there an opportunity, like once students have gone through the programs, then to sign it? Because it seems like if you're introducing it, there's always going to be a certain percentage of students who are going to be like,
I don't
what
feel
is
like
this exactly?
signing
You know,
it.
just
Yeah.
sort of, you know,
Absolutely.
and then once they understand
Yes,
the
and
program, they might.
And on the high school, for example, they're up on the wall in the high school. So a student always has an opportunity to sign it. And what we've been looking to do also, which we were talking about, for example, when new students come in, right, talking to new students about that and also looking for them to sign it. But yes, I have not, I know that the other two No Place for Hate committees have done it, but when I go in the schools, I'm usually going straight to a classroom, so I haven't had a chance to look for exactly where it is up. But yes, a student who is interested in signing it again can always sign, not sign it again, but signing it can always sign it.
Okay.
Could you send us a copy of it?
I sure can.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Just, it would
Just
be
the
nice
bullet
to
points.
see
Yeah.
it. Right. The other question I had or thing that I wanted to mention is because we have various committees, you mentioned them in here, the ones that have met and are going to meet, the working committees.
Yes.
How people find out about them and perhaps volunteer to be on them and are selected for them, I think is an important thing to be considering. I've had questions about, you know, as an individual, how do I get onto this and all, and so I would like some greater clarity going forward on how people can do that.
Absolutely, and the committees are all listed on the SCASD equity page with my information there if you are interested in getting on them. And now the other thing is, most of the committees now are establishing regular meeting times. Like, for example, we're going to meet the first Tuesday of every month, for example. One of the most difficult things with 9 different work groups with between 20 to 40 people on each work group is figuring out who's coming regularly and, you know, and where we need more people. So we're still trying to figure that out. But the key piece is that always anyone can go to that SCASD equity, scasd.org/equity page, and there is a link there for the work groups. They can see what each work group is tasked with doing and reach out if they're interested in joining.
Thank you.
Auden? Any questions or? I'm all good. Okay, great.
Hello.
Okay. Any other further follow-up questions or discussion? Okay. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rhea. Good night.
It's really helpful. Thank you. I think with that, we'll take a 5-minute break while we transition to our budget update. So we are adjourned for a few minutes. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. The next item on the agenda is District Goal Category Fiscal Stewardship. We'll be looking at budget development for 2020-2021. This is shown in attachment 6B1. So we have Randy Brown and Donna Watson at the table to introduce this.
Good evening, and it's before 10 o'clock.
How about that?
So tonight's update is rather brief. Just want to make sure that we're kicking off the budget season very appropriately, giving you a heads up on what the next several months looks like till we ask you in June to approve a budget for the new year. There's still lots of information out there yet to be analyzed and gathered. Lori mentioned earlier the state budget. Obviously, that will be we'll be watching that very heavily. But hopefully, there's not any large areas of concern as have happened in past years. But we expect we'll expect a level playing field as far as state funding. And then if we receive anything in addition, that will be something that we can take into consideration after that budget is approved. What we've provided is several attachments for you tonight showing the areas of review for the last several years in our budget process, the dollar amounts that they comprise of our budget, and then also a percentage. Then giving you a schedule of the areas where we expect to do deep reviews so that you can be prepared for that. And then also an updated budget development calendar for you. And highlighted is an April 27th board action requirement. So that will be an extra meeting that we'll ask you to schedule. And that is similar, if you remember back last year, we needed to schedule an extra meeting in April just to meet the timelines, just the way the calendar falls. We are working on our new and revised initiatives or program changes for next year, and those would result in our be included in our budget proposal later in this process. We're also preparing for our areas of review presentations. Obviously, the entire budget proposal. We're all working towards an approved budget in June. So our areas of review where we're going to be focusing most highly this year, in addition to salaries and benefits, would be student support services, community education, student activities and athletics, printing services, and food service. Is there any questions or comments?
Laurel?
Hi. What struck me when I looked at this and looked at the calendar of those meetings is that the things that we have, sorry, let me get it here. The things that we have, in a sense, some of the least direct control or input into are the first ones scheduled, and that leaves less time if we did want to have some discussion and perhaps impact on the budget development for the board to actually have that information and any necessary discussions. So there are some things we can do with charter school tuition. We certainly have talked about that, but it's relatively minimal in terms of direct board input. Same thing with PSERS, food services, and yet those are first. The things that are April 6th seem to me like the ones that there might be more potential impact or board direction from.
So there is a direct correlation to our developing this schedule as well, and that's related to the items that are sooner are easier for us to compile and are less time sensitive in relationship to our budget development process. Obviously, the items more later in the process on April 6th, those are the more complex and have, as well, I understand that they have more, and if the board would like, this is our proposal. If the board wants something different, then we can react to that and give you feedback and explain why or why not. That may not be possible.
Right, well, Randy, wouldn't some of the, I'm sorry, Bob, some of the, like, in order, knowing salaries and benefits and FTEs and all those things, we need to have more of our registration and demographic information available later in the year, correct, before you're able to really make predictions about what those are going to be. And in March, you're not going to have any of that data available or time to analyze it.
We really need the month of March.
Right.
Because we're in the middle of January, and we're compiling a lot of that information. And so we use February as a building block, but yes, we need the month of March to do a lot of that as well.
Right.
So that's an example of what it all comes together.
Because some
But-
of your enrollment data and stuff and projections you may not have
Right.
until some of that begins.
I think the proposed budget additions will be, that'll be one the board will want to engage in. Why would we propose these items and not others? Because there is annually, there's a long list of requests, and so that'll engage the board, I'm sure, deeply. I think the April 6th information, some of that will help us to better understand some overall details, but I do think that key request for things that would be additions would happen before then. I hope we can meet that deadline.
Right. And obviously, if we are able to get things completed further ahead than what we expect, we will move those up and we'll provide those. There'll also be committee meetings, obviously, as well.
I was going to ask about the Finance Committee.
At this
I think when we were in Finance Committee and talked about some of the, how we wanted to focus our discussion around some of these categories, such as student activities and athletics, community ed might be another example. I think there was some, I don't know, like frustration might be too strong of a term, in terms of looking at how we've done it over time, that sometimes it's not clear to board members what are the levers that exist for, if there's something that we want to change, it's not, like what those decisions may be
I was going to say, I
are
think
not
you're
necessarily
looking at
clear.
the impact areas, the areas of impact and the drivers. I think it's-
Exactly.
Right. And so we're working on that as well, because especially one conversation that we had about student activities and athletics, it was very thought-provoking. And
It was.
And we're still trying to respond to those conversations that were generated at that point in time.
And for us to understand kind of where are the decision points, because it's not always clear. I don't know, Scott, would you want to chime in on this?
I wouldn't even, again, make too strong, it's not that there's a lack of clarity, it's just not even knowing, where the decision and the information intersects to be able to then move backwards from that to impact the decision.
Right.
Could I just say something along these same lines? Thinking about the meetings that we had last year where various departments, just various administrators presented to us, I'm wondering if it might be useful for board members to reflect on those meetings and think about where we perhaps might have wished for different information or a different approach to some information, and bring that to you all before those reports get made. Because I remember after those meetings, it's the unknown unknowns.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, we kind of know the unknowns, and so having a sense for that before these things even get created might be useful.
I think bringing those to the Finance Committee be the ideal place to discuss, because then we can clarify what information is being requested and time it out.
Gretchen?
I just remember one thing from one of the Finance Committee meetings that I attended that was, I thought, at least within the people who were at that meeting, both administrators, I believe, and the board members, that could be helpful in tackling these questions that you, Randy, were talking about, was the costs, the expenses that are one-time, and grouping that separately, because the ongoing ones, I think we're all a lot more familiar with, and just separating that bifurcation would be, I think, well, it's not my opinion, I mean, we were talking a lot about it at that meeting, but would be fruitful in getting board members to understand where those decisions are being made and why, I don't know, Scott just worded it really well, where the information is and why those decisions come from that information. Anyway, that bifurcation, I think, is what we all said, ooh, that would help.
I think athletics might be one example of a report that we had last year that was difficult to sort through because they're so frequently having one-time expenses, but that are perhaps cyclical. So if you look at any one-year snapshot of our spending on athletics, you can't make heads or tails of like, why did we spend this much on this team and that much on another team? And it's because they have needs for materials at different times, and they're not one-time expenses, but they're like once every 5 years, maybe, types of expenses.
Well, not
So-
ongoing.
Right, exactly.
Like life cycle expenses, like replacement of uniforms and things like that.
And that might actually be a good example where, considering some prior conversations, where we might need to take a step back on that kind of topic, because some element of that is board related and some element of that is just part of the athletics department. It's part of running the department versus the board coming in and saying, and I'm not saying we're trying to do this, but the appearance of coming in and saying, okay, we're going to get uniforms this year and uniforms that year, versus just our trying to understand that those are pockets of these isolated expenses. It just so happens that they're one-time expenses that occur on 10 different teams every 5 years, therefore they kind of become a recurring expense.
So there might be a way of organizing the information. That,
Yeah, and I would just sort of, not to reject what you said, but to sort of cushion a little bit. And one of the reasons that it was a concern in the first place was concerns about equity in terms of spending per team. And so being able to balance that just to ensure that we are seeing that there's equity across different sports, different seasons, boy and girl sports, that would be comforting to me.
So I want to give you a little bit of assurance.
Yes.
Athletics is not an area that I think we need to spend time on. And I'll tell you why. Because the state makes us complete an Act 82 report.
Okay.
And we have been doing that for
4 years? 3 or 4 years?
and we have not seen any areas of concern to this point. And so but what we can do is we can compile those data points very easily and provide that data. That's not an area of concern for me, because we do look at that, and obviously the department then reacts to in some way, shape, or form. Or if there are some inequities, they're explainable because this was the year that football got uniforms, as an example.
Got it.
Okay? The areas that I think that came up in the finance committee were non-athletics. And so that's your student activities. And that's where we have very high difficulty in tracking the information, because we're not as sophisticated in our accounting for those as we are. Not to say that we don't know what we're buying, it's just that we don't track it at the activity level like we do athletics. And so it just takes a lot more research to understand what we've done, especially in prior years, let alone the current year that we're in. So that, I think, is where other conversations have led to some uncertainty and some concern and desire to know more information. And we're working to see what we can do. I think Scott, in that one finance committee, prefaced and said, give us your recommendation on how we can best look at this without getting to the most granular piece of information, and that's what we're working on. But I'm not saying that you shouldn't ever look at the athletics. It's not highly regulated, but there is a reporting structure, and we complete that process, and then obviously before it's completed, we're looking to prior year, and we're looking at the current year, boys and girls, and middle school and high school, and we're looking at that information, and we can share that, and it's always been available on the website once it's been completed. So that's a good place for us to start, but I can't get that granular with the other areas, but we'll work to get as much comparable information as we can.
Great, thank you.
all right. questions over here?
The only thing that occurs to me occasionally, we'll have an opportunity to review the needs in the area of like gifted education, for example. And that will be shared out to us, and there'll be a defined need, but then we wind up with a budget commitment which might not match quite what the defined need was presented as being. So that's just an example. What I'm basically saying is when we get to the proposed budget additions, we often get to the answer to the line at which the administration is willing to commit elements of the budget for the coming year. What we don't know are the ones that were left behind. I'd be interested. I'm one of 9, and it's the CCL side of this. The programming side is less than it is the budget side, the finance side. But I would like to know what those priorities are.
Well, I think that we did last year provide more information than we did in the past, and we are working towards, through our prioritization process, to be able to provide, to meet that need.
And Randy, to be fair, I also realize I haven't been in attendance at finance committee meetings the way I might have been. So that's one of my.
We haven't gotten there yet.
That's one of my planned goals this year too, is to participate more, have more conversations. And again, it's a process thing. It's not about necessarily about the outcomes. I'm not second guessing the. I would want to be more aware of what those choices are they're built into the process, the budget planning process, when it comes to programs, basically. That's what it comes down to.
Gretchen?
I think it is very soothing to hear from you that athletics is not an area of your concern, and why, and that makes sense. It's different than what we're hearing, at least some of us are hearing from, like, remember the student rep and the dancing uniforms and,
Well, that's not
you
an
know.
athletic thing.
Right,
So, yeah,
right. That goes into the activities, like you were
right.
talking about, and so it does get, and then, we've all gotten an earful, I think, about lacrosse uniforms, and so it just, it's different than what we're hearing, and so some of it might be explained by, is it athletics or is it not? And then if it's not, then, do we want to support, for a hypothetical, as an example, do we want to support the dancers who, go on to support the football team? No, we don't, but we want to support the football team. Well, why?
No.
And so it gets murky.
I'm not saying that athletics is
Yeah.
perfect, and I'm not saying that what we've been doing is perfect, but there is an opportunity where we look at a per-student cost.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. And, us as board members, we hear, of course, from the community, and then they come to, well, why is this not funded, but this is? And so I think that's where a lot of the questions are coming from, so that we can respond in a responsible and honest way with accurate information. And so at least my curiosities, that's where they come from, so that I can actually answer people with real information and not just have it kind of be a question mark in my head. So
The best thing that I hope that can come out of this is that you have increased information to be able to answer general inquiry, provide specific enough answers that I would still consider them a general inquiry, because there's a lot of things that are going to depend. But if you have a better understanding of a process or the processes that go into place, but not necessarily an understanding of each one, that's my goal based upon, and if that needs refined more, we're open to that. But that's my goal at this point.
yeah, and that's just really helpful for us, so thank you.
For the board and how we're looking at development of the budget really relates to needs in the district, and we're using that question. Explain the need. And, we've had to go back to people multiple times to better understand what's the challenge that you have in this program or with these particular students, or are we not compliant with caseloads, so we can, as we come forward and we prioritize what we believe needs to be acted upon, we can share with you not just what we're requesting, but why. And then, are there other items that don't make the proposal? Absolutely. And we'll share those. As far as the process, we're having iterations with people from around the district, obviously all of the principals, all the directors, including the curriculum office, and making sure that we're reaching out to the different levels and different buildings. But there's always a lot of requests, and right now, it was a pretty long morning going through those to clarify the needs, and we've tried not to get to the solutions first yet. So we're doing our own iterations on that, and we'll interface what we're working on through finance. But I think I wanted to address that, what Dan, and then also to Lori's point, I think reflecting on last year and what might have been more helpful, or what you want, I think if we flow that through the finance team to try to refine what we bring forward to the full board, that'd be my request to help us out.
We have a meeting Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be a great time.
Great.
Laurel, any questions?
I already said my concern.
Okay. Alden, anything? Okay.
Amber? I just had a comment in general. I made this at the Finance Committee on page 4 of 9. What we look at in rotation, I really like that presentation. You get an idea of how much of the budget you're actually looking at, and you can see, and I think it was to Laurel's comment, about 88% is pretty much, decided by contracts and so on and so forth. And then where we really need to look are these other areas, and I think you've outlined, the type of coverage we got, and then the nature of the rotation, and I think this is an excellent page summary.
Any other questions, discussion? Okay, so we'll discuss further in finance on Thursday then. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, so looking at board committee reports, first, Culture, Climate, and Learning Committee.
Culture, Climate, and Learning Committee, we had 2 items on the agenda, and this was right before Christmas. The first was Dr. Tanner's proposed research, which he reviewed earlier this evening. And the second element was a discussion of the need to update the resolution regarding assessments and Mr. Bach discussed with the committee the kinds of adjustments that might be necessary to make our resolution more timely and more appropriate in terms of actually discussing the current conditions and the mandates that we've been suffering under in relation to the high-stakes testing, and the ways in which the recommendations we'd be making to PTE to essentially have expectations for local school districts that are more instructionally useful, like MAP assessments, the repeated assessments over the course of the year that's useful for instructional planning, as opposed to the one-time summative assessment that's presently mandated. We're looking for more flexibility, basically. So there's some, and Dr. O'Donnell had a memo actually that went out earlier this week on that particular issue too, come to think of it.
As a follow-up, I did speak with PD and Matt Stem. We had a phone conversation late last week, and they are not moving, because I wanted to see if our concept of smaller chunks of testing and overall less testing being more informative for faculty, if some of it happens earlier in the year. They're not moving on that yet, but they're willing to look back at it. They have looked at the model. Some of the negative feedback has involved constraining curriculum on teachers. If it is smaller chunks earlier in the year, I don't know if it's kind of like the old foresight thinking, but I think this Friday when we have our legislative update, I think we need to continue down our road of requesting that, and then seeing if our encouragement would cause the legislators to have PDE revisit that. I do think the concept of MAP testing makes a lot of sense. If we utilize that experience and did not have the one-time summative block of testing in the spring, it would be more practical for everybody involved. So I think they should revisit that for what it's worth. I know we didn't get to iterate on that again since the meeting, but that's this Friday morning, so I wanted to share that.
Yeah.
So
I'll be there.
I'm gonna bring Vern, and we'll probably plug him in to explain it. But I think we should go down the road of pushing for what we've outlined in the draft resolution CCL was working on, and bring that back next meeting.
That'd be great.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
And then Policy Development Committee.
Yeah, just a couple things. We talked about what we wanted to prioritize for the discussion on Friday, and then we spoke more about the sustainability policy. We'll be bringing a draft back to the policy committee at the next meeting. And then lastly, 908 will be coming before the board soon, and so just a reminder to policy committee members to give that a look again, so that it's ready to go.
Great, that's it, thank you. Okay, then looking at upcoming committee meetings, like I had noted, Finance and Audit on the 16th, Communications Committee next week. Looking out at future agendas, our next meeting is February 3rd, and followed by a meeting on February 17th. If board members have items for future agenda planning, if you could let us know. And with that, I'll be looking for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any, all in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. We are adjourned then.